We're going to debrief on our most recent round of review here at Unfunded List. This was our 22nd round reviewing grant proposals. So I'm Dave Moss. I'm the founder of Unfunded List. Some of you folks on the call today were around back in 2015 when we first started this. I did originally think that we would do this just once, give some feedback to some folks on their proposals and make a neat little campaign out of it. That first time went very well, not just for the authors, but one of the things that was true is that the evaluators who participated in that round, they were really sort of grateful for the opportunity, found it very unique. They were sort of thanking me for the opportunity to volunteer and review grant proposals. And so seeing that there was interest in this program from both sides of it is really what convinced me to focus up on building the organization, which we've been doing over the last 11 years and 22nd rounds of review. So what happened in our 22nd round? We reviewed 96 grant proposals. We received 96 through our various partnerships and submission forms. That brings our total amount of proposals reviewed to over 1,500. We had 200 evaluators participate, which was a record. Our previous record was last fall when we had 219 participate. So that's 30 additional evaluators participated this time. One of the pieces of feedback we got last round and in some of our previous rounds was that I was giving too many assignments. Some of the folks, I usually say 3 to 5, but I was giving 5 to pretty much everybody. And so one of the things I did this round is if you're new to the committee or you're not a diehard, right? I probably only gave you 3 or maybe 4 if they were short ones. So there were fewer assignments per evaluator this round, which is one of the reasons why we got, even though we had a lot more evaluators, we ended up with more or less the same number of reviews. It was 850 reviews last fall, 854 reviews. And by review, I mean the evaluator completed, they read the proposal and they filled out the comment form. That gave us 8.5 reviews on average per proposal for each feedback report that we sent out. There was a minimum of 5 reviews in each report. There were a handful of them that only had 5. A couple of reviews ended up with 18 reviews. I think there were 3 or 4 reports that had 18 reviews, which is nice. Again, the average was 8.5. Most people were getting somewhere between 8 and 12 reviews on their proposal, which is great. It's a nice mix of perspectives. Usually they're hearing from someone who's on the funding side of things, someone who's a grant consultant, some people in their field, some people from outside of their field, right? A nice mix of different perspectives. Then when we got into the report discussion phase with these 96 different groups, so after we sent the report out to them, 86% of them confirmed they got their report. I mean, we sent the report to everybody. We just haven't heard back from about, I think it's 13 of the folks. People are busy in the summer. They don't necessarily reply. That's fine. Hopefully we'll hear from them eventually, but we do have to close the round eventually. 70% of the 96, which I think is 71, scheduled report discussions with us. Some of those folks had to miss or skip or not attend. So 58%, which I think is 60. I forget, my percentages are off. But a lot, we did a lot. Margaret and I did about 30 report discussions each, which is an hour-long conversation with each of the groups that had received their report. Before each report discussion, Margaret and I, we reread the original proposal. We read all the feedback. We come in very prepared to have a substantive discussion about the grant that we had reviewed. So who were the folks that submitted proposals? Good question. It was a very diverse group. They literally come from all over the world, New Zealand, Togo, Malawi, Kenya, a bunch of African countries. We had a few from Europe. We had a few from Latin America, one from Argentina, 2 from Haiti. We had a few proposals from Canada. We don't get a lot of proposals from Asia, which is unfortunate. I think a lot of our evaluators would like to review those, but it's not where I'm from. I don't have a huge network there. We would love to review proposals from anywhere. If you know folks in a disparate part of the world, encourage them to submit proposals to us. Education and youth development, by far the most common category that is showing up in these proposals. 3 and 4 out of almost 75% of all the proposals we reviewed dealt with education and youth development in some way. There's quite a bit of intersectionality in our proposals. So it may not have been just education and youth development, but education and youth development was a key component to 3 and 4 of the proposals that we reviewed this round. This is followed shortly after by health. We include behavior. We're pretty broad in what we include as health. And that's about half of the submissions are health focused. Some literally for hospitals or nursing schools. Others sort of like health is more of an aspect of a larger program. Health is showing up in about half of the submissions we're reviewing. Climate and environmental concerns is, I think, our third category. A little bit smaller than health education, but a growing category. We had a few more of those than in previous rounds. Some of the other categories that showed up, each of these had multiple submissions. Proposals related to the arts. So we had a couple different recovery centers this round dealing with drug and addiction. Homelessness programs or programs helping the unhoused in some way. Programs working with refugees, immigrants, new Americans, asylum seekers. Also, as I mentioned, we had proposals from Africa and all over the world. These are mostly proposals related to international development. Usually it's either going to be agribusiness, sustainable agriculture, or it's going to be something that's empowering women and girls, or both, trying to empower women and girls to work in agribusiness. Right? There's also some fairly unique, kind of outside the box international proposals we got in. Well, and then I was excited to see we had a couple, 2 or 3 domestic proposals focused on journalism, increasing access to journalism or improving reporting usually from a local standpoint. And these are mostly in the American South. So it was a nice batch of different topics to review. Pretty much everything that's important going on in the world. There was a proposal on a similar topic. The teams behind these organizations range quite a bit. Lots of solo founders like myself, quite a few all volunteer-led efforts. And then we also had some, large, we had universities that submitted proposals and larger systems, places that have, formal fundraising teams, grant writers and stuff. And then also, like I said, solo founders and individual people trying to run programs. As I mentioned, all over the US, we had a lot from Maine, thanks to a partnership we had with MAMP up here. We had a decent number from Texas, which I think is just because it's a large state. And then a lot of them come from the DMV area, the DC, Maryland, or Virginia. I think that's just because when I founded the organization, that's where I was living. That's where our board chair lives. That's where a lot of people live. It's also, I think DC is probably the greatest percentage of nonprofits per capita. That region has a lot of nonprofits. There's a reason I was living there. And we also get, in terms of the international proposals, there's almost always proposals from Haiti and Kenya. I think those are 2 very common, and Uganda as well. Those are the 2, probably the 3 most common international countries for us to receive proposals from. But again, we've gotten them from all over the world. I think we're at over 90 countries total we've received a proposal from, which is always fun. New country this round was New Zealand. That was our first proposal from New Zealand, which was fun. When I actually did the report discussion with them, I learned that the New Zealanders I was talking to, they had been to Maine, where I'm from. They went to summer camp up here, a camp I had heard of. It was fun. It's a very small world. So in this round, we set new record. It was not a record in terms of total proposals. We've had some partnerships that brought in over 100 proposals a few times. This one, we had 2 smaller partnerships, which we'll talk about on the next slide. But we set a record for new proposals. These are proposals that come in unknown to us through our website. So brand new organizations that we never heard of, 37 of those. We also set a record for returning organizations. Anyone that has had a proposal reviewed by us is invited each round to come back to return. And this 38 returners this round was a record for us. So that's over a third of the proposals that we're reviewing are folks that have been through the process before, which is, I think, a nice show of support. And again, records for both of those categories. Hoping to once again set records on both of those. We're really looking for a big round this fall. So hopefully we end up shattering those records once again. As I mentioned, we had 2 partnerships that helped us get in proposals this round. One of them is an ongoing relationship we have with MAMP, which is the Maine Association for Nonprofits. I'm from Maine. Unfunded List is now based in Maine. And we are members of our local nonprofit association for our state, which is a great state association. They do a decent amount of work for all of New England. It's a larger state association than like the New Hampshire or the Vermont one is. So we work through, they promote the opportunity to have a proposal reviewed and also to evaluate proposals throughout their network. And that brought in 12 proposals from Maine. So these are mostly rural proposals. There were a few that are in Portland, our one city, but mostly proposals serving rural or small town communities. There were some that dealt with recovery, some that dealt with youth, some that dealt with the environment. It was actually interesting. We got a couple national nonprofits that happen to be based in Maine. So it's not all locals that submit through there. The Maine partnership has been very cool. It allows us to bring national philanthropy experts, bring their perspective in, give it directly to Maine-based nonprofit authors. But we're also able to go the other way. We're able to get evaluators from Maine and people who are working at nonprofits from Maine to be reviewing nonprofits from all over the country. And one of the things that I found that's kind of interesting is I think Maine enjoys somewhat of a romantic position in the average American's mind. Like, even if they've never been to Maine, like, Maine is an interesting state. So they were interested in reading proposals from there. And it's been cool to be able to include a dozen or so proposals from my home state in each round. And we are a state that is, we have a higher percentage of nonprofit employees than most states. Nonprofits are a very important part of the economy up here. So great to be working with them. We also this was our first partnership with an organization called the Greater Sum. This is an accelerator for nonprofits that are dealing with poverty and related issues for children, mostly. They are, like I said, an accelerator program. So they give often the first grant to nonprofits. And this partnership was where we worked with their alumni. They were offering a grant writing training cohort, like a course, so to speak, to alumni, people who had been through their program. And as part of that course, each person was encouraged to write a grant proposal, and that proposal was reviewed by us, and that sort of coincided with the timing of the course. Generally, I think it went really well. These were a bunch of interesting organizations from the Greater Sum that we got to review, and the report discussions went very well. It was good talking with them. We hope to be able to work with them again in the future. So that's who submitted proposals. I was just talking about our two partnerships, MAMP and the Greater Sum Foundation. We love partnerships. Proposals come in directly through the website. We have a large number of people who've been reviewed in the past who I think will come back again. So we're going to get a lot of proposals that way, but partnerships are a great way for us to get a big batch of proposals from an established funder or capacity building group. Here in the spring, we had one capacity building group, MAMP, and one funder, Greater Sum Foundation. Anyone with a large network of people who are either applying for grants from them or applying for grants, in general, is encouraged to partner with us. We can find some sort of way to make that work, give the folks in your network the opportunity to opt in and have their proposal reviewed, perhaps review some proposals with us. When we do a partnership, like some of these you see listed below, the larger scale ones with issue-based funders, allows us to do some more specific programming. So for instance, when we did the Dental Trade Alliance Foundation partnership, all of those proposals were related to oral healthcare in the US. We went out, we found some funders for oral healthcare. We found the biggest funders for dental care in the US, got them together on a panel. That allowed our evaluators to learn more about the state of oral healthcare funding. It allowed us to recruit additional funders who have a lot of experience in oral healthcare. That improved our ability, it grew our evaluation committee in general for all of our applicants, but also improved our ability specifically to work with DTA Foundation. Increasingly, these partnerships also allow us to give feedback to the funder itself. We'll get into this in a moment, but as you may know, as evaluators, we source feedback on the proposal itself, but we also ask for feedback for the funder. For instance, with Dental Trade Alliance or with Kettering Family Foundation or with some of our other partners, we're able to not just review all the proposals, but then once that review is done, we can go in and analyze the comments and the reviews and come up with the trends and themes and sort of report to you on the challenges and the issues being faced by your grant seeking network. Also, if there are issues with your RFP or your application, or if questions are confusing, or if our evaluators have some other sort of feedback for your process and how you make decisions, right, you'll be able to source that from an independent committee of folks. A question, someone has raised their hand. Julie, go ahead. You have a question?
And maybe you covered this, I came in a little bit late. So the partnerships, do they give Unfunded List some financial money so that people who are applying for grants from those partnerships, they get the evaluation for a reduced cost or anything like that?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. That's generally how it works.
Okay.
So just a few things. We do, in case you don't know, we charge $100 usually for your first submission to Unfunded List. That's an administrative fee. It's not the cost of reviewing. If I were charging, right, if this were a profit-seeking organization where I was charging full price or I was a consultant, it would cost a lot more than $100. I want to be very clear about that. Organizing the full review with 8 to 12 evaluators of a proposal costs more than that. It's an administrative fee that gets paid the first time. But yes, when we do these partnerships, generally the partners provide some funding to us. And encourage their networks to opt in. They help us with the sort of the communication and the marketing on that front. And generally they cover the cost of that they waive that administrative fee for their applicants. It's not $100 per review though, right? When we're working with funders, it's more of a, right, we figure out the total of the partnership, figure out the cost of it. And, these are funders, they're not unfunded grant seekers. So the thing works out fairly differently. Also, every funder is different, has a unique process, has a unique number of proposals they're reading, as the proposals are a unique length, different topics. There's like a different need I might need from my evaluation committee. For instance, we were talking earlier, I know a lot of our reviewers want to read on youth development. It's like over half of our evaluators told me that when they signed up, they want to read about youth education, youth development. So if the partner if that's the topic of their proposals, great. I already have a bunch of evaluators. If they're funding on an issue that's niche, like for instance, Dental Trade Alliance, that means I probably need to go out and find some funder. So that each partnership can be quite a bit different. So there is no set cost to them or anything like that. But yes, generally these partners listed here, we came up with some sort of arrangement. They funded that round, sponsored that round, however you want to talk about it. That allowed the folks from their network to opt in. These partnerships work out really well for us. It's a much better way for us to build sustainability. We get a bunch of proposals in advance. It's nice to be able to know the topics of the proposals before they come in, because that helps us prepare for the round. Obviously, the feedback that we provide benefits the network for our partners. We're able to give feedback to the partners on their process as well. These are really mutually beneficial situations. So thank you very much for that question, Julie. And if anyone on the call is interested in partnership, obviously I'm interested in partnering with you. We have quite a bit of capacity these days. I have 30 new evaluators as of today. Would love to put them to work reviewing proposals from your network. Please get in touch. Happy to try to find a way to work together in the future. Here's some stuff we learned. There's some key findings from spring round. I took all of the reviews. It's like 17,500 individual comments that make up the 854 reviews we did on the 96 proposals. I can put all of those comments into a spreadsheet. I show that spreadsheet to an AI, and I ask it to do some analysis of what the most common areas of criticism, areas of feedback, issues, suggestions made, that sort of thing. We'll go over some of the top level stuff here. But I am finishing up a report, 12-page report, insights and analysis of our 26th round. I should be done with it this week. If you're interested in reading a copy, please ask me directly, and I'm happy to share it with you. But here's just some sort of our top level findings. Once again, we found that the proposals were mission strong, but infrastructure thin. It's the most general thing I can say about the review. I think not a single one of these proposals did any of our evaluators look at it and say, oh, this mission is weak. I think that's something that's been true over all of the rounds. Every single person that sent us a proposal, at the very least, real issue, strong mission, passion behind the cause. That's just we're not seeing a lot of we're not seeing programs that shouldn't exist or anything like that. It's all fairly important work in the batch, which sort of highlights how difficult work can be for funders, right? Because they're probably looking at the same thing too. They're receiving record number of applications, all from great missions, great groups with a lot of passion, and that's who they have to reject. I have the advantage, I suppose, that I don't have to reject anybody that comes in. So these are the most frequent areas of criticism that came from the evaluators. Number one, clarity beats polish. Just sort of in general, there's lots of comments about how evaluators didn't really understand what was being said. It's difficult to explain yourself, and having only one proposal to read it can be a hard way but oftentimes this wasn't clear. I wasn't clear on this. I'm not clear how this works. I'm not clear on that. That is by far is a very common comment that we get. Another very common thing that comes up in the reports is sort of a commentary on outputs versus outcomes, and also sometimes just on activities. This is something that came up in the report discussions as well. Almost every proposal we read is reporting on their activities. Some of them are reporting on their activities and then the outputs that come from those activities. And then the really great proposals are including information on the outcomes that result from those outputs. What we're seeing is that some funders are perfectly happy funding activities. You can see that from the questions on their forums. Other funders clearly need outputs, right? I'm looking to support this many people. And I think outcomes data is the one thing that almost every proposal we reviewed this round could have used more of. One of the things I say often in the report discussions is that the reviewer's thirst for outcome data will never be sated. I think that's true for funders as well. I actually think it's a fairly easy way to criticize a proposal. I can pick up pretty much any grant proposal and say, oh, this could have stronger outcome data. And then I sound like I'm a smart critic, right? But it is true. And I think it's when you're funding, that's the outcomes are ultimately what you're trying to accomplish. And so I think as proposal writers, it's always important to remember that that's definitely something our reviewers are noticing in the reports and probably funders as well. Lots of comments on budget clarity and also on what I would call the sustainability paradox. We had some proposals this round that are actually doing kind of well financially. One of the groups we reviewed this round actually a couple of the groups we reviewed this round have been funded by Mackenzie Scott in recent years. They were sort of talking about how sometimes that's a challenge. Like so they got new funding from funders because of the Mackenzie Scott funding. That was a vote of confidence. So other funders are like, oh, if Mackenzie Scott's funding them, then we should fund them as well. We want to be on board with that. There were other funders who the exact opposite. Oh, you have Mackenzie Scott money. We don't need to fund you. You have plenty of money. We're going to fund these other groups that don't have huge donors. Right. So, and I think there's lots of nonprofits out there that have to, with each new funder, figure out like anew what sustainability means for that funder. And this is something that is a challenge for the evaluators. Oftentimes, these reports will include sort of very different opinions. One evaluator will have a huge issue with the sustainability of the program, and another evaluator will be like, yeah, like, so one will say, oh, you're reliant on grants. That makes me nervous. You need to increase your earned revenue so you're not as reliant on grants. And then the very next evaluator will say, of course you're reliant on grants. This is a philanthropy program. Like you need to focus in on your grant funding, right? And become sustainable that way. And I think that's representative of the funding field in general. Different funders think different things, and possibly even the opposite of each other when it comes to sustainability. Another thing that came up, at least for me, in a lot of the report discussions, particularly if I was talking to another solo founder of a nonprofit, is something that we talked a lot about. And I use the phrase the founder's conundrum. I think a lot of people are familiar with founder syndrome, and I'm saying the founder's conundrum is quite a bit different than that. Founder syndrome is generally where the founder has moved on or has built the organization up and hired staff. So like there's an ED or a CEO now, and the founder keeps sort of getting in their way. The founder is saying, oh, this is how we used to do it. Or the founder is controlling relationships, like not releasing their Rolodex to the development director, like those sorts of, the founder is sort of holding things back and not allowing the organization to grow. I think that's a real problem. It does happen at nonprofits, but the founder's conundrum, quite a bit different. And this is something that I think Unfunded List is currently I think we're in this position. A lot of the groups we reviewed this round as well. And this is where the nonprofit has a very talented and passionate founder who is doing most of the work of the organization and is doing it for very, very low pay or no pay. Some of the founders we review are not getting paid at all. And what they need to make their organization more impactful is simple. It's not complicated. They need $250,000, right? They need to be able they need to flush out their tech stack, have all the software and administrative support that they need, and they probably need to hire 2 more people who can work full time and be professional and do real work, so that they're not doing 5 jobs, right? But they themselves are already underpaid or perhaps not paid at all, so they can't hire. They can't hire people at a full salary if they're not being. It's just you find yourself in this. Your hard work as the founder is what's keeping this organization alive. But that also looks like, as from the funder standpoint, when they see that, there aren't a whole lot of funders that are excited about giving us that $250,000 that we need to move on. So this is somewhat of I'm very biased on this. It's somewhat of a personal plea from me. The founder's conundrum. I think this is something that's worth talking about. I've been thinking about trying to write about it. I think there's a lot of nonprofits out there that have, talented founders and really want to build the organization. And I think the sector should do a better job of supporting, and there should be more opportunities for turning these founder-led initiatives into real institutions capable of operating at scale. Moving on to some other key, I think storytelling under constraint. This is something that happens a lot. Because of the extreme character limits in a lot of the applications, I think grant writers are sort of limited in their ability to tell stories. And they instead focus in on numbers, outcomes, KPIs, proven boilerplate language. So telling a story is with flowery language or using quotes or testimonials takes up a lot of characters and syllables and stuff. And so those are being left out of some of these more rigid applications. And that's really showing up. A lot of our evaluators are writing comments that are like, I wanted to learn. They'll say with the caveat, I know you had a character limit, but I wanted to know more about this. And I think that is a comment that's for both grant seekers and grant makers, that you're limiting their ability to tell their stories when you severely limit the length of their answers like this. And it just sort of goes to this is something that transcends grant writing. Lots of times when you're writing, you have character limits. Like if you're writing a haiku or a sonnet or a play or a novel, like it can't go on forever. You have to tighten these things up. And storytelling under constraint is a real challenge to this kind of writing. Another comment that's coming up often: redundancy and structure. When do you talk about certain things in the application? How often do you repeat yourself? When you repeat yourself, are you repeating yourself with the exact same language? We found a decent amount of that, like the exact same sentence appearing in multiple different answers. A common topic that comes up pretty much every round with us with our review here is on funder fit and on tailoring your language to the funder. This is coming up in the reports. It's also coming up in the report discussions. We can say tailor your language to the funder. Sometimes people will say code switching, right? Well, I like to think about it. I used to be an actor, speaking to your audience, right? So, and I think a lot of the proposals that are seeking a lot of success, right? They're looking at the funder's website and using some of the same language, some of the same words that they are using, repeating them back to them, mirroring funder behavior. And I think you can think about it lots of different ways. I think about it as it's respect for the funder. You're talking about your program using their language so that they can understand it, so they can make an informed decision. We are seeing a lot of proposals that are like really well written, but they're written using the organization's language. And that may include some buzzwords that the funder isn't familiar with and things of that sort. And then lastly, we had this round and in some of our previous rounds, some format mismatches. We had some people who sort of didn't understand, like don't necessarily know what funders are looking for. And then we have just lots of people who have a pitch deck, some sort of marketing presentation that they're sending to funders that might work in other types of fundraising. Like I don't really know. I've never raised money from a investor or a venture capitalist or anything. I know pitch decks are a useful fundraising tool for some companies, generally not for philanthropic institutions. And they do tend to get criticized for not having a lot of information when they come through our program. That being said, we will, if you have a pitch deck you want reviewed, you can send it to us, but we're better with the traditional grant proposal. Some more findings. Here's the most frequent suggestions that evaluators made. Again, I've got longer versions of these things in the full report. So if anyone really wants to dive into this stuff, email me. I should have this full report ready for you soon. Sorry, I'm just noticing. It looks like I had a question. What are the reviewers' thoughts about the challenges of DEI-themed language, especially in federal grant proposals? Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of reviewers have thoughts about that. I don't want to generalize. Like we had 250 evaluators participate, plus 96 proposal authors this round. So that's probably about 500 people in total participated in this last program. And they have a wide variety of opinions about DEI and how federal grants are going. And the state of the politics in the U.S. The vast majority are not happy with the current administration in the U.S., particularly when it comes to their decisions around federal funding. Many of our nonprofits are dealing with this directly. A lot of them have had, the reason that they're applying for funding, the proposal we're reading is to a private foundation. And the reason that they're applying is because they lost their federal grant and they need to make up a gap. So we're reading a lot about of that sort of stuff. And we're not an advocacy organization. Inclusivity is a huge part of my work here at Unfunded List. I try to include as many proposals as possible in each round. I try to include as many perspectives as possible on the evaluation side. It's an essential part of my work. I don't have federal funding, so the federal government has no say into how I approach that work. A lot of people are upset about how things are going on that front. And it's caused a lot of chaos in the grant seeking world. I do know that a lot of evaluators joined our committee because they're concerned about this issue. The day USAID was closed, we had a lot of signups that day. We had almost 10 people join the committee on that day because they were concerned about the state of grant making and wanted to join the committee to help out. We've also had some, there was one group we've had some groups that wanted to apply for federal funding. And what they've done is they took in previous proposals to the federal government, they were using DEI language and stuff, language that the current administration would frown upon. And so they've had to write new drafts, new language and they've sent the new language to us for review. So there was an artist who'd been funded by the NEA in the past and wanted to apply to this NEA, the current administration's NEA. And so they had to rewrite how they talk about their work, and they wanted us to read that. So there are some ways that we're dealing with this directly, but it's something that certainly touches a large number of the proposals we're reviewing. This has been the decisions being made well above my head are having a lot of impact on the work that's happening here. The one thing I'll say, we have several nonprofits that we reviewed this round who are working to support new Americans or providing legal aid for refugees and immigrants, some community centers that are doing that sort of thing. But we are actively interested in supporting groups that do that kind of work. And there are some of the organizations that we're reviewing this round have been very candid with us that they know that the way they talk about their work has put a bullseye on them, a target on them. For the most part, I think it's not slowing anyone down. They're still committed to doing the work. That's generally what I've seen on that front. So yeah, going back to suggestions made by evaluators, show your baseline, not just your ask. I think this is a good comment, and I think a lot of folks point this out. A lot of the proposals we read are really just sort of focused on like what could be done if the grant was awarded. We'll be able to do this, right? Instead of first establishing their baseline of what they're doing now. We were talking a little bit about, character limits and that sort of thing. Tighten the writing, don't just shorten it. And again, this is something that's not just true for grant writing. E.B. White has a great quote. I forget what it is, but it's like, I would have made it shorter, but I ran out of time. Right? The work of writing is removing words, not adding words. And that's definitely true for grant writing. Match the funder, don't recycle the proposal. If possible, you should write a new proposal, brand new, for every funder you apply to. I know that sounds like a crazy amount of work, but that's what will work best. Funders are different. They have different ways of thinking. They don't necessarily want to read the same proposal you sent somewhere else. I know there's a decent amount of chatter out there in the philanthropy space about common applications, and there are some funders that say they'll read a proposal from somebody else, but I'm not seeing it as a real trend. In general, funders have their own application. They want their own questions answered in the way that so that they can make the decision the way that they want to make their decision. We occasionally so an organization will send us their master grant proposal and then the full list of foundations that they plan to apply to. And those are very difficult for us to review. Our evaluators will say this, you just gave me a list of 30 different funders that have 30 different sets of priorities. I can't necessarily comment on whether this language will work because I don't know which funder you're going after. And I think that is somewhat standard advice that's given in this field is you should have a master grant proposal and then pull language from the boilerplate doc into each submission, right? I think can be a huge time saver as a strategy, but also it won't allow you to match the funder as well as someone who's writing a brand new application for each funder. Name your existing support. A lot of proposals don't name who the other funders are. Sometimes you're asked that directly by the funder, and obviously you answer it then. And again, this is something where it could be a double-edged sword. Naming that you have a bunch of committed funders already might cause the funder to say, "Oh, they're already funded, so I won't have to fund them." But the flip side is true. If they don't see any support for you already, then no one wants to be the only foundation supporting you. So that can be a tricky one. But in general, I think showing that you have endorsement and support is really helpful. And lastly, relationships. The importance of relationships comes up in the reports, in the individual reviews. A lot of our applicants are aware of it when they first submit the proposal to us. And then in the report discussions, we're talking about this a lot. We did a training back in February with one of our evaluators on cultivating connections, how to build relationships with funders. But this is I think right now, the relationship and the research you've done and the connections and all that, and that part of the grant seeking work is an increasingly important part of the work. You still need to have a strong application and strong writing, and the proposals need to be good and the reporting needs to be good, but the relationship is just an increasingly important part of it. And if you're ignoring the groups that we talk to that are not winning any grants at all, are ignoring the relationship building part of it. And often, and just as a small corollary to that, your website, your 990, your profile on Candid, all the places that funders might go to do research on you, right? That's a very important part of setting yourself up for success. As I mentioned, we give feedback to funders. There's a question on the forum that says, do you have any feedback that's more for the funder than for the applicant? Here are the most common things that came up from there. There's some longer descriptions in the full report. Application design inconsistencies, ambiguous eligibility and fit language. Funders, the fund seekers are trying to figure out if they're a fit for your program. And oftentimes the website is not making that clear. Other funders do a really good job of this though. Checking the website to see if you're a fit is a really good step. And a lot of funders are very clear on their website. This is something that we talked about in a lot of the report discussions this round. Collaboration is praised in theory and kind of penalized in practice. I've seen a few funders that say like, we're interested in funding collaboration, but like, it's very difficult to write a proposal about a collaborative effort, right? So which organization takes the lead on writing it? We read a few proposals this round that were written by a lead organization, but about work that's being done by several nonprofits. And those proposals are very difficult to figure out because the lead organization will tend to act with some humility and they're going to talk about their partners more than they talk about themselves. And then you're left wondering, what is this lead organization doing? What's the role of each one? It's just, this is it's much harder to read a proposal that's about a bunch of different nonprofits doing a bunch of different roles than it is to read about one nonprofit and doing their work. And I'm not seeing a whole lot of, when I talk to folks about where they are getting success, I'm not seeing hearing a whole lot of success stories about people who won grants to work in collaboration with other nonprofits. I think the funders talk about collaboration all the time and then they say they want to see it. I think it's fundamentally penalized in practice when it comes to grant seeking. I think collaborating with other nonprofits can be very beneficial for other reasons, but it's with lots of funding opportunities, I think it can actually hold you back. Inconsistent expectations around urgency and sustainability. Yeah, so I think sustainability is kind of like you can reject a grant proposal for being too sustainable and for not being sustainable enough. It's just sort of like a catch-all for rejectors. And then this is similar to some of the stuff I was talking about. I think volunteer-driven organizations are facing a specific credibility cap when it comes to funders. So this is something I can tell you from personal experience. Funders don't understand why they would fund Unfunded List because the evaluators are volunteers. And lots of people, especially if they don't have a lot of experience managing large group of volunteers or working with voluntary associations, sort of people who are like really deep into capitalism, for instance, just have a hard time understanding volunteer-run organizations and how to fund them. And I think it's society at large probably doesn't understand volunteerism and how volunteer-driven organizations work, particularly when it comes to funding them. I think lots of times they think volunteer means free. That means we don't have to fund it. But in fact, I can tell you, every new volunteer that I onboard increases the costs. It's an extra user for the software. It's more time. It's a more coordinative effort that has to happen. Volunteer-driven organizations do deserve to be funded, and the sector could do a better job of understanding that. And this is something that's happening a lot. A lot of our reviewers were commenting on this, and it's coming up in report discussions. Most of the funders that our applicants apply to this round are going to see a record number of applications this round. So they're going to get more applications this year than they got last year. The capacity of these funders is something that our evaluators are curious about. Like, if you're not adding staff, but you're getting 3 times as many applications this year, how are you dealing with that? And if anyone knows, I am curious about that as well. Some information on who evaluated with us this round. So we had 250 evaluated at least one proposal. 186 of them finished all of their reviews with an average of just under 4 each. Very varied backgrounds. We've done a really good job of including lots of different perspectives on the committee. About a fifth of them work directly in grant writing or consulting. They are the grant writer at a nonprofit or some sort of freelance grants consultant. About a fifth of them work at a foundation, or they're a funder, or they're a philanthropy consultant of some kind. And the rest work in very different roles across government. We have a decent number of retired folks. Anyone running a large volunteer committee will know that retired people are an important part of that. And we have some people who work in government, and we have a decent number of folks who are international as well from overseas. Lots of different types of people. We have a few doctors, a few lawyers, some high-level professionals as well. The top reason they join is professional development, which is cited by about 4 in 10. There's another 2 in 10 that say like some sort of learning, but like not in a professional capacity, like they want to learn more about things. So I would say 6 in 10 are doing it to like develop their skills and learning Other reasons are that they want to give back to the sector, or in fact, increasingly people are saying, well, I got my proposal reviewed and it was very helpful to me. So now I want to participate in that way. As I mentioned, when they sign up, they tell me what kind of proposal they want to read. About a third say education or youth. About a quarter of them say health. Those are the most requested topics to review, which mirrors the most common topics of proposals that are coming in. So that's very good. And LinkedIn is the single most common way that evaluators are finding unfunded lists. I wrote a post this morning, which is my most viral post of all time. If you want to do me a favor, find me on LinkedIn and like and comment on my most recent post. So yeah, we are complete with the report discussions. We did 60 of them, I think, Margaret and I. I took the transcripts of 19 of those discussions and had the AI look at that to say what was the most common things we talked about in the discussions. One, the conversation is very important. If you just take the written report and don't schedule the discussion, you are getting less. The authors that are showing up are consistently saying that talking through the feedback and not just reading it is really helping to make it actionable and to move things forward. And I'll say, I'm sure Margaret would agree, the folks that come to the report discussions are showing up with questions they've printed out their reports and they're coming very prepared. And that's adding to the usefulness of the discussions. Relationship building was the thing that I know this is true for me. We talked about that most often, probably the most common, if they applied cold to a funder and the report pointed out that was, that they should have worked on that. They don't know how do I know this? I don't, you know what I mean? They don't necessarily know how to warm up that relationship, which is tough. I don't have a magic wand for them, but we do our best to try to help folks and talk through that with them. Another thing that came up a lot we have a lot of people now, we're very blessed on this front, who are participating on both sides of the programs. They're both reviewing proposals and having their proposals reviewed. Those folks, I think, are clearly getting the most out of the program, and they're telling us that in the report discussions. They're like, this report was really helpful, but the fact that I had reviewed as well made it easier for me to read this feedback. And when I'm giving the feedback, the fact that I've read a report on my own work really enabled me to give feedback in a way that was helpful and candid. I mentioned this earlier. Your public presence is a part of the application. We're talking about this on the report discussion often. We had a few applicants this round that didn't have websites, right? And I mean, 2026 is pretty easy to put a simple website together. And I think as a funder, if I go to look you up and I can't find a website for you, I can't. You're making it pretty easy for me at that point. But not just having one, but I think particularly invite-only funders, but also anywhere that's accepting applications. I think reviewers are looking at this stuff. You're going to want to have your social media and all that, and your public presence is a big part of your application these days. Another really fun part, I know if Margaret were here, she would agree. Often when we get to the report discussion, we learn that the organization we're talking to has won a grant. They used our feedback from last time and they won this grant and they won this grant, or they won this one and they want to apply for that now and they want to talk through some of that with us as well. And this is where we learn about the sort of concrete wins that are literally traceable to the feedback that we provided. So these are our unfunded list strategic priorities for the rest of 2026 based on the insights and analysis from our first round. These are more or less the same priorities that we had for a confirming round on that front. Our highest priority strategically, and the thing that helps us the most, is to grow the evaluation committee. So 30 new evaluators today, great. We're off to a great start today. Evaluators are the most likely group to donate to us. I think all of our donors right now, individual donors, are either current or past evaluators. Almost all of our partnerships in recent years, I think I can't remember one that wasn't, almost always comes from an evaluator. So someone evaluates with the program and then introduces us to this group. Or the Greater Sum that we partnered with this round, their executive director, she evaluated with us for a year and then decided to do the partnership with us. So that's the same. Dental Trade Alliance Foundation, Kuja, Candid, all those places. Someone who was working there was one of our evaluators first, got to know the program, got to talk it up internally, and then eventually we were able to form a partnership with them. Even more important than partnership development or fundraising or anything is just growing the learning community. More evaluators, more proposals in, because those things lead to all the other things. Second, program excellence and scale. I don't do this stuff because I want to do it poorly. It's just important to me that each report is as good as it can possibly be, that each evaluator is as prepared as they possibly can be, that we're getting everything right. We also, we do want to start getting bigger. The goal for this fall is 150 proposals, right? And I'd like to see the report discussion rate increase. I'd love to see the number of reviews per report increase. Like I want to do this as well as possible. We want to be the best at it. I don't want to just give you some feedback. I want to give you the best feedback. Partnership development, big part of my time. It can be difficult to partner with funders, right? Each one is different and unique, and timing doesn't always work out. And sometimes, there's the agency issues and that sort of thing. But I spend a decent amount of my time thinking about ways that we can partner with organizations or working with our active partners to communicate to their networks, to make sure that all their folks are getting uploaded correctly and all that sort of thing. And I do see partnership as the key to our own sustainability here at Unfunded List. If we had a handful of large scale partners with a bunch of funders who could provide us with operational support and help us access authors, proposals and evaluators, right? Then I think we'd really have something going there. Lastly is strategic events and visibility. This debrief right here, part of that. Margaret and I are going to Grant Summit in November, which is one of the bigger international conferences for grants. Margaret went to the Bridge Conference last week in DC. Some of you folks may have gone to that. I went to CGI last year. I'm hoping to go again this year. I'd like to find some way to be at UN General Assembly Week. We do our own event every March called Reviewers United. We've done that 2 years in a row in DC in partnership with Spur Local. That's an event aimed at training grant proposal reviewers. So it's how to read a budget, how to make comments. We work with a bunch of different reviewing committees to put that event together. So we're looking at a big round. A few more events that we're going to go to, and hopefully we deliver 150 reports this fall. That has been the debrief for spring 2026. We had a few questions come in the chat, but if there are any more, I would be happy to answer them now.